Welcome back to another episode of The Conscious Artist, a safe space for conversations around mental health awareness for musicians, artists, and all human beings. I am your host, Pallavi Mahidara. I'm a concert pianist and teacher, and I am absolutely thrilled that you are joining us today. My hope for this show is that it will give all of us a sense of solidarity and knowledge that we are not alone, and together, through these conversations, we can create more awareness and change for a healthier future. I am honored to be joined by today's guest. She's an Iranian-American violist and a senior lecturer at the Mozarteum, a mentor for the Mentoring Arts program at the University for Music and Theater in Leipzig. She is currently enrolled in a doctoral program at the Hamburg University of Music and Theater under the artistic supervision of Daniel Barenboim, where she is conducting research on Re-Orientalism in music. I want to let her share more about all the work she is doing herself, so please join me in welcoming Muriel Razavi to The Conscious Artist. Muriel, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for inviting me here on this podcast.
It is my pleasure. There are so many things I want to ask you about, but firstly, I want to pay respect to an extremely important topic. I don't feel that I'm an expert on any worldly topics, but particularly with what's been happening in Iran over the past year, and frankly, for decades before that, I have felt very helpless because I don't know what I can do concretely to help. So I thought perhaps the least I can do is allow space for Iranian voices to be heard that can help us all be more educated and supportive. I'm also quite frankly very frustrated that the Western news coverage of Iranian women's fight for freedom has dwindled so much. You hardly see news reports on it anymore, although the relevance has not changed. So Muriel, thank you for trusting me and this space. And if you feel comfortable, I'd like to give you the space to share with us your feelings and your own perspective of what has been happening in Iran.
Yeah, well, thank you for phrasing so beautifully. And you basically were just saying everything that's on my mind and in my soul. And what's also frustrating to us Iranians, it's absolutely right that it has been going on for decades. And it's right that it's not getting enough media coverage. And I think the thing that people that are, outside of Iran, or maybe not Iranians themselves, but also Iranians outside, the thing that we can do is to spread on social media everything that we see that's going on inside of the country. And the main reason for that, the importance of spreading on social media, is that the internet is often censored by the government and often not accessible for hours or days, really. We don't have free internet access. You have to go through all these special websites to enter, like, for example, Facebook. And I think the spreading of knowledge and information, that's what's going on there, and that the people are still fighting for freedom, is very important so that it doesn't get lost on the outside.
Thank you for sharing that. I remember seeing just an influx of information on social media about what was happening in Iran in the height of it several months ago. And I feel like your point about censorship, internet censorship by the Iranian government is so relevant because that influx of information is not there anymore. And whether it's because the Western world has stopped covering, or because we're not, it happens all the time, right? In the world, whenever there's some big tragedy that happens, right in the beginning, immediately there's a huge movement for spreading awareness, for taking action, for donating, for fighting injustices. And after a while, people get on with their lives,
Yeah.
Like those of us that are not directly connected with what's happening, whether it's because we're not part of that nation, part of that nationality, whether we have no direct connection. For example, like someone like me, while I'm Indian and there are certain similarities in our cultures, I don't have a direct connection with what's happening in Iran. I don't have a direct connection with what's happening in Ukraine, for example. But as a human being and as a woman, I feel very strongly that this is not okay, that the concept of violation of our basic human rights, violation of our lives, violation of our existence, it infuriates me. And the fact that this is happening to, my sisters, not my blood sisters, but every woman is a sister to me, right?
Yes.
So how do you, first of all, how do you cope with that, having it be your own nationality? And the fact that I'm guessing that you probably are not able to go back to Iran anymore, that losing that connection with your home country. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's very hard to deal with it. I grew up in Germany, so my home more than Iran is Germany and Europe. But I feel very connected to Iran. I went there very often. I went to school there also for a short period of time when I was 13, 14. And the last time I went there was 2019. Then COVID came and I couldn't go. And now it's almost become impossible for me to go without fear or serious consequences, maybe, due to my Iranian citizenship and my dual citizenship. Actually, I also have the American, and that I just don't know what's going to happen at the airport. Due to the fact that I have the Iranian citizenship, there's also not much that outside countries could do for me in case they decide to detain me. And that fear is there, so that now basically at least the next years, probably I won't be able to go back. And I can only hope that it will be possible in the future, because otherwise it is definitely the case that a part of me will be missing forever if I can't go back. And that would be pretty heartbreaking to not go see my family again, and also smell the air, see the different colors of sun and what the sky shows, the earth, the mountains, the people, and the spices in the air. And that definitely would be missing forever then in my life. And that is a pretty difficult thought to cope with. And this is only me having grown up in Germany. I can't even imagine how much pain others that grew up there and have their very, very close family, so siblings and parents there, how much pain they must be feeling not being able to go back at the moment. What you spoke about, that it's just that in the beginning of a wave or of catastrophe that happens, that the empathy is very strong, people feel, and then it just starts to wear off. I think that's a very natural human occurrence, and it happens everywhere and all the time, that we get used to horrible stories. And maybe that's also the only way to survive as a human, to somehow always go, forward and not be afflicted too much for years and decades by all the pain that we're surrounded by. But sometimes I have the feeling that we're bombarded with negative news much more than maybe decades ago, because nowadays it's accessible all the time. And that it's so much quicker, the process of, okay, I got used to it, now I have to go forward. And I would wish for people to actually hold on to the empathy that's deep down in them, and not let everyday life cover over that human aspect inside of them.
Wow. Yeah, I certainly agree with you that I think we've become desensitized as a population on this earth, as the human species, because tragedy continues to hit us. And you're right. The coverage, the accessibility to news, the speed at which we can receive news. I mean, sometimes it's within seconds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's constant, as I said before, like a constant influx of news that inundates us all the time. I mean, we're all of us, like, if we're on social media, if we're scrolling, if you have notifications from the news apps or websites that you follow, it's just constant information. And to be honest, in the last couple of years, in the last handful of years, there has been a lot of negative news. It's not just that we're reporting on it. It's also because there has been, with
Mm-hmm.
COVID and with everything that's happened in Iran and other countries, and the war in Ukraine, and all the migrants losing their lives crossing the sea. I mean, there's just a constant influx of tragedy and death. And on one hand, I feel like it is a natural process for us to eventually let go of the trauma that we face in life, right? Like, we need to find a way to heal from that trauma. If we live in that trauma our whole lives, we won't live.
That's right. I think we just have to find a better, more humanistic way how to cope with all of these negative occurrences around us. And I think we as musicians have to take over responsibility, and we have to be conscious that we communicate in a language that is universal. Music can be understood by everyone, no matter what background or culture. And I think with this huge advantage literally in our hands, we should try to do good and better and try to connect. And I really understood that's also being between these worlds. That's my responsibility very directly, because we've had these migration waves to Germany in the past, and they will just continue, not only due to conflict and war in the Near and Middle East, but also due to the climate crisis. And so we will have more and more refugees seeking a safe place here. And the thing we should start to do is how to learn how to better welcome them with our universal language in our hands. And that's something I want to try to develop more in my artistic life, and also try to pass on to the next generation, because it will continue to be of great importance, if not even of more and more importance in the future years and decades to come.
I could not agree more. And I'm so glad that you brought up music, because I genuinely agree with you. I mean, music is a healing tool. It is a universal language. It is a way with which we can share our empathy and compassion, and it's a great teacher of tolerance, I think.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I remember a few years ago, I went to El Sistema. With El Sistema, I went to Greece, near Athens. We visited a refugee camp, and I still think about it almost daily, and it affected me greatly to see that refugee camp it was basically a city. You had a hairdresser there, you had restaurants there, people were listening to music, buying food. You saw children running around, and we went to the music school that was in the middle of the refugee camp. And yeah, we were just, showing our instruments, playing some music with the children. And there were music teachers there at the refugee camp that were teaching those children songs from all religions and cultures. And I thought that was so beautiful.
Wow.
So there you had there were many kids from Syria. They were just singing these Jewish songs, and also European songs. I mean, different parts, French, German songs. And that was so beautiful to see. And I thought, wow, that's actually so important work. And in our music studies, and nowadays in the music industry, it's so much about technical perfection, competitions, who plays better, faster, more in tune, who sells better for the labels, for the industry. It's all about marketing, Instagram career, and it's just not what life should be about and what we can do as a musician.
I resonate with everything that you're saying. And first of all, thank you for sharing this memory and this story with us. What a beautiful experience to have had, and a reminder of how universal music is. And I want to go back to what you said earlier. It hit me deeply when you were sharing about your dual citizenship, because that didn't even occur to me that having Iranian citizenship makes it even harder to go back, which is a very ironic thing to say. But right now, in the midst of conflict, it's not like you can go on another passport, because your Iranian passport will show up in the system. And these are very sensitive topics. So please, whatever you feel comfortable answering and sharing. But I'm curious to know how you use music and your connection with the viola and music and the music world as a healing tool for yourself, because the effects of war and repression and oppression on people and women, and this fight for justice and equality and equity for women, it's exhausting. And we all do it in our different ways. We're all trying to fight a myriad of systems, And it does become exhausting sometimes. And I spoke a few episodes ago with a singer talking about power imbalances and power dynamics, and taking our power back as women, and against those who abuse their power. And while it's a completely different topic, that fight for our rights and our freedom feels very similar.
Yeah, it is. There are many similarities. Also, the research topic of Re-Orientalism that I'm conducting on Iranian female composers of the Iranian Female Composers Association. This theory of Re-Orientalism has the power to deconstruct dysfunctional powers between West and East, of course, but also between male and female that have been going on like this for decades, if not centuries. And it's a chance for Iranian female composers to claim their voice again. Even if it happens from outside of Iran, it still has an impact in Iran. And Re-Orientalism has many functions. This theory was introduced by Lisa Lau in 2009, and she was examining Southeast Asian writers and how they write about their home countries. And she came up with this theory, Re-Orientalism, and it's pretty fascinating. Of course, it has so many different aspects and facets, and it can be seen negatively and positively. But I just want to point out now here in this podcast that it has the power to write new meta-narratives and give power back to women, or in my case of research, female composers. And as you said, that music also can be a healing tool. I discovered this for myself, that connecting with Iranian female composers and with music from Iran and the Persian culture is part of a healing process for me, bringing all these backgrounds of mine together in one. Because, my whole life I've been asked, where are you from? And it's quite difficult to answer because I was born here, but I have one parent from the US, one parent from Iran. I have both their citizenships, but not the German one, even though I was born and raised here. And so we have so many different religious backgrounds in my family, etc., etc. And it was always quite difficult to answer that question without talking for 3 minutes. And I found this beautiful way of combining all of these questions of mine and all of these backgrounds of mine in music. And then I realized so much better than actually healing or bringing something whole in myself together, is the aspect that I can actually create dialogue and do so much good with this way of connecting and commissioning pieces from Iranian composers and playing them here in Germany. And now I'm working with an agency. We're founding my festival Sound Seed. It's going to take place the first time in November 2024 in Leipzig.
Wow.
And the plan is to work with children and youth that have refugee backgrounds and use this music also as a communication and healing tool, as we were talking about before. I want to commission a piece for viola ensemble and perform that with my students. So also that, as I said before, the young students that I have that are just 20 or 21, in the beginning of their 20s, start working in that direction and realizing it's actually easy to commission pieces. It's easy to go to camps or schools that are not full of kids with rich families, but maybe the contrary, that have never been in contact due to financial reasons with classical music, and to start working in that direction.
This is so powerful. I truly admire everything you are doing, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think we have a responsibility as artists to find a way to give back to the community and the next generation in the way that is most authentic and purposeful for us. And for me, for example, I found this avenue through the podcast and through teaching. And of course, I love performing. Of course, I love sharing my music on stage with audiences because it's a completely different way of sharing. But I honestly do agree with you. I don't think that art and music should be about ticket sales and marketing and how many Instagram followers you have or things like this. But I get it. I mean, it's still a business at the end of the day. And, that doesn't mean that we have to follow the business in the same way that our peers might, if that doesn't resonate with us. And so this is really, truly very inspiring what you're doing. And I definitely want to talk more about the festival after.
Yeah.
But I'd love to hear more about your doctorate and your work with the Iranian Female Composers Association, because I think this is so important, the way you describe it, to be able to give a voice to Iranian women, both literally and also through music.
Yeah, I mean, when you say voice, voice is a very important thing, actually. And we could begin with that because the female voice is not to be heard in Iran. It's forbidden since 1979 that women perform as singers on stage in public in Iran. And one of the pieces that I perform is from Nilüfer Nurbakhsh. and it's called Veiled, and it's also about the suppressed female voices. And actually, she wrote it for cello, but there was also a viola version that was recorded also by Kimia Hesabi in the US, and I perform it here in Germany quite regularly, and it's with viola and live electronics, and you're like the granulated sound of the viola, and there's a female track with singing that is underneath the viola singing, and it is incredibly powerful. Also the build up towards the end, and so voice definitely plays a huge role in the compositions of the female composers that I work with. And Niloufer Nourbakhsh was actually one of the founders of the Iranian Female Composers Association with Anahita Abbasi and Aida Shirazi. And another piece where melody and voice plays a great role is one of the pieces by Gulfam Khayyam, Her Path Through Clay and Silk, that she wrote, that I commissioned last year. That she wrote it's a viola concerto, and we have the melody as Khune Javanan Vatan, Lale Damide in there, and that's a very prominent melody. The singing of that melody was also forbidden during the Pahlavi era because it stems from the constitutional revolution, the beginning of the 20th century, and from a poem from Ghazvini about how, so the direct translation is from the blood of the youth of our motherland, tulips grow. And it's about how the youth was killed when they were on the streets protesting against superiors, fight for, freedom and justice. And this melody is just as important as it was 100 years ago. So this aspect of voice, melody, singing plays a role in these compositions. And my research, I just spoke about two now, but there are so many more examples. And my research is about examining and understanding the compositions and what is behind the compositions, also from a historical view, and playing these compositions. So the doctorate that I'm doing is at the Hochschule für Musik und Theater Hamburg. And it's basically, if you want to say it really, if I break it down, it's 50% writing and 50% artistic. So the writing is about my artistic work. I learn all these pieces. I get in contact with the composers to understand how to perform them, how to play them, and how to interpret them. And then I conduct the research on the pieces and examine the voices. I interview the composers and ask them about their feelings and their reasons to use certain material in the compositions.
Wow, this is so beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. I want to ask, are these composers that you're working with, are they all living outside of Iran now? I mean, I'm guessing that they, especially if they're composing for voice, as you're saying, it hits against the law for women to sing, to perform. Are these women living outside? And how do you feel as both an Iranian, but also an outsider in a way? Are you able to see and feel how that affects their music in the way that the compositions come to life?
Some of the composers that I work with live outside of Iran. And for example, Gulfam Khayyam that I just mentioned, and her piece, Her Path Through Clay and Silk that she wrote, she lives inside of Iran.
Wow.
So it's quite fascinating, not only in the field of composition, but in the field of culture, how people manage to get around the censorship or still manage to have all these hidden messages in their artistic work that is so open to interpretation that it could be either that or that, and they have become masters in this sign language, in this symbolic messaging and very hidden messaging due to oppression and censorship.
Wow, this is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, we have a very prominent example in classical music is Shostakovich and his music.
Sure. Even Bach had a lot of hidden messages often, right?
Absolutely. I mean, showing what is on his mind through his music, his deep religious symbols, hiding his own name also in his music, and Bach. And yeah, I mean, throughout music history and no matter where, but at the moment it's definitely in Iran, and due to the censorship that we see many hidden things, compositions. And I think that's fascinating to study and to try to understand, because that's a huge hidden world that is not accessible to Western listeners. And I mean, Iranian composers are hardly on any programs here in the West or in Germany. And why is that? Why is that we only include a certain group of composers or ethnicities, backgrounds in our programming in classical music here in the West? And I really would love to change that.
Yes, I absolutely agree with you. And I have to admit, when we first started being in contact several months ago, and I started reading about the work that you're doing and the Iranian Female Composers Association that you work with, I actually started researching the composers there and seeing what works for solo piano I could find that I can program.
Yeah.
And I've actually put something for next season. And I do think it's important. I do think it's relevant. I do think it's again, like the least that I can do,
Yeah.
talking to you
Yeah.
and simply just having this conversation, or putting a piece by an Iranian female composer on a program that costs me nothing. It's the least that I can do. And, I'm so grateful for this conversation here and for you sharing what you are doing with your work, so that those of us that, again, don't have a direct line or a direct relation, or in a way, even access to what's happening in countries that are not ours, we can learn. We can learn from you. We can learn from those that are doing something about it. And I want to go back to something you were kind of alluding to earlier, this concept of identity loss. And I relate a lot. I've talked about it before, but I relate a lot because I'm Indian, fully Indian, but I was born and raised in the US. And I never lived in India, but I have so much family there. And I've been traveling there almost every 1 to 2 years since I was born.
Oh, no.
And like you, actually, the last time I went was 2019. And after that, of course, COVID happened. And I haven't returned for a variety of reasons, not on purpose, but I also have felt a lot of resistance going back, because there are some fundamental aspects of the culture and the way women are treated and the safety that women have that I fundamentally disagree with. And what I feel in India is nothing compared to what's actually happening in Iran, for example.
Mm.
I know you spoke about the fact that you can't go back, and that brings about a huge amount of loss to one's identity and connection to oneself. But I'm wondering if there's a shared experience here as well, where there's also like anger towards what's happening, and anger and like a resistance towards, in a way, not wanting to go back because you don't agree with those oppressions.
Absolutely. I mean, the situation right now, or I don't want to say since 79, because also under the Shah, there was no justice.
Mhm.
There was no
Mm.
balance. But I'm going to say, because we're speaking about female rights right now, is that since 79, the situation has gotten unbearable, in my opinion. I always have the feeling that here in Germany, I always have to at least point out it's not Saudi Arabia,
Right.
because there's a lot of misperception about how women actually live their lives in Iran. Iranian women do not wear a burqa. That's something I had to clarify very often in my life, so I'm
Mm.
just going to mention it
Yeah.
here. And they are allowed to drive, and there are more women at the moment enrolled at the university in Tehran than men, and so on and so forth. But I mean, these were the only few benefits that I can think of right now. I mean, the general situation is a catastrophe for women and female rights. The difference is that there's still small shimmer of hope that it's more the governmental oppression and suppression than actually the society's will that leads to what the situation is right now. So somehow I still have hope that the Iranian people actually would never support this if they were free. Women would also be free, and it's just the government being like this.
I see what you mean.
But I know that that is very naive to think.
Because people get brainwashed.
People get brainwashed, and also, of course, we Iranians have been talking about, if this revolution is actually successful, what is the alternative? I mean, do we trust Iranians enough to build a democratic, fair, new government and create justice and equal rights? Actually, not really. And one of the reasons is that there are just so many ethnicities in Iran, so many languages, so many religious and cultural backgrounds. I don't know how people will be able to create a fair democratic government quickly enough, also due to the fact because, I mean, Iran has been a monarchy for thousands of years. I mean, now it's not a monarchy, but it's still ruled by a handful of people or less. And the only chance of a democracy that we had was in the 50s, and that was putsched. Mossadegh was putsched by the CIA. So I think there will be a struggle, and that's why I'm not angry at the moment towards the people, even though also the people are responsible for creating this situation. But I also know that many of the people in 78, 79 really thought that the change will be good because they were so unhappy under the regime of the Shah. It just turned out to be much worse than the future.
I don't even know what to say.
Yeah, it's a really sad situation. And I feel so sorry for the generation or two generations above me that maybe grew up there and then after 79 completely lost their home because their home, turned into something unrecognizable and now never managed to feel home here in Europe or in the West, but also don't feel home there anymore. So they're all homeless.
Which again leads one to feel like they don't belong anywhere.
Yeah.
Right? That they don't have anything to hold on to, any roots to hold on to, a home. Yeah. I mean, the concept of home, the concept of feeling safe where you are, not just in terms of physical safety, but emotional safety. I don't think people talk about that often enough. And to have no safety in any sort of meaning of that word, I mean, it's unfathomable for me.
Yeah, exactly. Because, I mean, the concept of home, it can be so many different things. I mean, home can be family, it can be your own apartment, doesn't matter where.
But also what you described in the beginning about the mountains and the scenery and smelling the spices in the air and feeling the warm breeze on your face. I mean, these are things that directly relate us with who we are.
Yeah.
Right? Like our heritage, our cultures, where we've grown up, what we associate with that. And I mean, let's hope that it's not going to be forever. Let's hope that there's going to be a chance. But, hope by itself doesn't do enough. So again, I'm just in awe of the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
And even with your mentoring program, preparing students, yes, for their careers in music, but also, like you say, with your festival that's upcoming, to show them how they can make a more impactful difference as a musician. I think this is so important. And really, I admire you so much for that.
Thank you. That's very kind. I admire you for all this work that you're doing with the podcast and also creating a safe space and room for development and thoughts and hope.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And, this is a continued conversation. Thank you for helping to shed some light and some more awareness for us, some more knowledge for us. I'm going to be continuing to follow your work and asking for advice on how I can help to make a small difference. So thank you so much, Muriel.
You're also already making a huge difference. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for listening. I am truly grateful for the support from each and every one of you. If you would like to submit any questions or topics for us to address on the show, you can send us a message on our Instagram page @ConsciousArtistPodcast. Help us to spread more awareness by sharing this episode with your friends, your colleagues, your teachers, and your students. And don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Sending you all so much love and strength to tackle this week, and we'll see you next Monday for another episode of The Conscious Artist.